Welcome to Forests for Monarchs, Saving Butterflies, where we explore the journey of monarch butterflies, the forests that sustain them, and the people working to protect these natural wonders. I'm your host, Megan Fulton, and today Michaela Rogers joins us to talk how you can help monarchs. Michaela is a wildlife biologist with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. She serves as the agency's lead on pollinator initiatives, oversees implementation of the Kentucky Monarch Conservation Plan, and serves on the Mid-America Monarch Conservation State Technical Team. Michaela collaborates with a variety of stakeholders and promotes monarch and pollinator conservation initiatives in Kentucky and co-leads the Kentucky Pollinator Stakeholders Group, which she has done since 2018. So we're excited to have Michaela. She's also a board member of Forest for Monarchs. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Megan. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk a bit more about monarchs and how you can get involved from wherever you are, whether that is at home with a yard, lots of land, or even just an apartment, things that you can do to help monarchs. But the first thing I wanted to talk about, just because there's been so much talk, which is great in the media about monarchs recently, can you just start by explaining what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's proposal to list the monarch as threatened, what that means to conservation efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the proposal to list the monarch came out last December. And like you said, that has been, stirring up a lot more conversation, a lot of things in the media. And really what this decision, will do, of course, the monarch is still proposed right now, so no final decision has been made, but it will give the monarch that, official federal conservation status as threatened. And usually that, gives them more protection. That also opens up a lot more funding opportunities generally for conservation to happen on the ground. I know there's a lot of concern about, all of these monitoring activities that people do and wanting to keep moving that forward. But the service has been really intentional, with the monarch butterfly, knowing that it's a huge charismatic species. A lot of people are doing conservation efforts. A lot of people are already doing monitoring programs that have been in place for years. And so they've been really intentional with wanting people to know that all of that will still be able to continue. It'll just be that the monarch does have, this federal status, and then whatever decisions are made, there just may be a little bit more of, considerations that need to be taken in place before a project goes forward, that sort of thing.
Okay, and as of right now, though, as it's just a proposal, there's no changes for what people can or can't do to help the monarch.
Correct. Yeah, so if you are, planning on participating in any kind of the monitoring programs that take place, right now there's been no change. So you can still, monarch tag or do, like habitat monitoring, that sort of thing. And right now there's been no change. So until we get a final rule from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the species is just proposed at this time.
Okay, great. And so, speaking of different ways for monitoring or for people to get involved, what are some of the ways the public can help the monarch and pollinators in general and have the biggest impact?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we always tell people is, if you can plant milkweed plants, because of course that is the plant or the, plant that monarchs need, their caterpillars need to grow. So the adult monarch butterfly will lay her eggs directly onto the milkweed plant. And there's a variety of species. I'm in Kentucky, so there's about 13 species of milkweed here, but there's different species in different regions. And so if you can plant milkweed because that is the species that they need to grow. And then also, planting wildflowers in your yard so that the adults have a food source because of course they're drinking nectar from those flowers. And, if you're someone that wants to get more involved, or maybe you don't have an outside space that you can put plantings out right now, you can also participate. There's a variety of what's called community science or citizen science initiatives. You can, get involved with tagging monarchs through Monarch Watch, and we'll talk more a little bit about that later. You can do monitoring initiatives through the Monarch joint venture to look at, what monarchs might be out at a park or somewhere around you that has milkweed that you can monitor. There's a whole host of different monitoring options that you can, just report when you're seeing monarchs or their caterpillars or larvae, that sort of thing. So there's kind of the whole gamut of being really involved to just recording like a few things here and there if you are someone that wants to get more involved.
No, that's great. It sounds like there's something for everyone, whether is this like an introduction to monarchs or you've been doing this for years. So I think that's a
Yeah,
great reminder.
absolutely.
For the gardeners listening, because I know we have a lot of those amongst our community, what are some gardening recommendations you have? Because always get a lot of questions about how can people improve their gardens for pollinators or for monarchs. And with that, are there any sort of misconceptions you hear about gardening for monarchs that you would want to clear up?
I think one of the biggest things is, you can really get started with whatever garden that you have at this time. If you can only do, if maybe you have an apartment and you only have a little bit of space, you can get some potted plants. I have had milkweed in pots before, like swamp milkweed has grown fine in a pot before. So you can really get started with whatever you have. I think that's a common misconception where people get overwhelmed because there is so much information out there because a lot of people are excited about monarchs. There's a lot of nonprofits working on this, so there's so much information. Sometimes it can be a little bit of overload for people, but really going to a nursery or a garden center near you that sells milkweed plants that are native to your area. And if you're not sure about that, you can usually ask somebody working at the nursery. And then just getting, some plants that grow native to your area that produce flowers and just having something that's in bloom for each part of the season. So spring, summer, and fall, having something blooming will really help for, the monarchs that are both moving through your state and for the monarchs that, might spend the breeding season there in the middle of the summer.
I think that's a great reminder about the seasonal gardening. I know for me, that's a good reminder. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and talking about gardening and plants, and I know that you've talked about the importance of the native milkweed. Can you talk a bit more about the role of native plants and why they matter so much for the monarch life cycle?
Yeah, so the way that insects are, moving around and queuing on things in their environment, they are much better adapted. The insects in your area will be adapted to recognize and to use the plants that, are naturally growing or would just normally grow in the grasslands and fields that are in your area. So those are going to be, more nutrient rich usually. They are going to be kind of the resources that those, butterflies are seeking out. And the, nectar plants are what the adult butterflies are going to be looking for as a food source. So when they are migrating, making this long migration to Mexico each year, they're going to be looking for those little stops on the way. And those, native wildflowers are going to be what they're keying in to come down from their flight for the day and find somewhere to feed on those. So having those little spots, we call them, monarch way stations, those little spots that have both milkweed and nectar plants is really important for them to be able to seek out.
Oh, great. And with all of the plants, native plants, with habitat restoration in the US and Canada, because that really is what the US and Canada restoration focuses on is the milkweed and the nectar producing plants. How important are large scale habitat restoration projects versus maybe some small scale, backyard actions that someone might do on their own?
Really, as much as we're considering this long-term migration, as much habitat as we can get out there as possible is great. Some people do have this large acreage that they can convert to these grasslands full of wildflowers and plant milkweed, and that's great. And that will, that's going to promote a lot of pollinators. That's going to bring monarchs in. There'll be plenty of, cover for the insects to, get down in and have that as habitat. But like we were saying earlier, even if you do just have a small space, that's going to be really important too. And you can really start anywhere with some of these small spaces. Because the monarchs, that are migrating are going to be looking for sources all throughout their journey. And some of these are flying, like you said, from southern Canada all the way, through, southern Texas to Mexico to the Oyamel fir forest. So they're going to need as many stopping points as they can throughout the way. And so, while that may not be a huge field of wildflowers that they can drop down in every single time, if there's these small patches that they can use to refuel for that journey, that's still going to be really important.
think that's an important point. So for anyone listening, just a good reminder that whether you have a lot of land or literally just like a balcony that you can put a potted plant on it, it all makes a difference. So nothing's too small to help. And so one of the more fun ways, I think, that's my opinion, to get involved is through monarch tagging. And we've mentioned that a bit, and there might be some folks out there who haven't actually heard about that before. So can you explain what monarch tagging is?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, that's one of the first kind of main activities that I got into when I was first getting started with monitoring monarchs. I was like, okay, what is this tagging thing going on? And it gets a lot of people, interested in monarchs. It's exciting. And there's been some really interesting results. And so, what that is that during the fall migration period, Monarch Watch is the nonprofit that actually runs the program, but we order tags every year, and anyone can put in and order a set of tags to start tagging monarchs. And essentially, you're just going out with a butterfly net. You're trying to capture adult monarch butterflies that are coming through your area during the migration, and you're putting a small sticker on a specific cell called the discal cell on their wing, and that will have the monarch tagged, and then you release it again. It continues on its journey. And then Monarch Watch has a program where there are people searching in the overwintering forests in Mexico for recoveries, for, finding these tags again every year. And so it's a great program to not only get out and get to see monarchs, but you're also contributing towards an over 20 plus year data set of this monarch tagging data that Monarch Watch manages.
That's amazing. And one of the questions I get occasionally about monarch tagging, or I see it out there, is the tagging doesn't actually hurt the monarchs, correct?
Correct. Yeah. When they were first starting out the program, Monarch Watch did some different trials to, figure out what size sticker, what type of sticker, and how to make something that, of course, is not going to impede the monarch's flight, because the whole point is that we're tagging them, on their way to Mexico on their migration. So we don't want to put anything on them that's going to negatively impact that flight. So that is something that was a consideration for them when starting the program.
No, I think that's great. And then if you missed it, it's Monarch Watch. That's the organization to go to for the tagging. And we'll put a link in the description of this episode, a link right to the Monarch tagging resources that they have. And so you talked a little bit about the 20 years of data. How has the data from all of the tagging helped researchers and conservationists, excuse me, understand the monarch population?
So all of this data, it's being housed by Monarch Watch, it's going into their databases, and what that allows them to pinpoint is where these adult monarchs are migrating from, and what certain areas are kind of more hotspots along the migration, and what areas might be more areas that monarchs are actually just year round spending the year. So we have some non-migratory populations along the East Coast. We have a non-migratory population of monarchs in Florida. So there's been a lot of information gleaned from, what these migration routes are, what the paths that these butterflies are taking on the migration, and then which areas are and are not kind of involved in the main parts of the migration. Of course, these butterflies are always doing something different. They're always moving. There's always going to be one moving in ways that we're not exactly expecting it to, but by and large, kind of what are those important areas for the butterflies? Specifically in Kentucky, one thing that's been interesting is to see, we've been having these monarch tagging events. We have a Kentucky Wild program, and we bring, some of our members out each year to do a tagging at a place called Perryville Battlefield. It's a historic battlefield site from the Civil War, but there's also an overwintering, or not overwintering, overnight roost for monarch butterflies that stays there overnight during their migration. And what has been interesting is we've had a tag recovery from that area. And so then we know, to communicate with the land managers out there, and they can use practices that best suit, helping pollinators and monarchs have as much habitat as possible. So all these spots where there have been recoveries, we kind of know how important those are for the monarch butterflies migration.
That's great. And so the data is really about migration, where they're going, behaviors, patterns of behavior, more so than it's not necessarily tracking like health or anything like that.
Yeah, that is another common misconception about the tagging program is people every spring will start seeing monarchs and they'll get very excited and be like, okay, I would like to start now, can you send some tags? And we're always like, well, you actually have to wait. In our area, it's usually end of August that the migration starts. Of course, further north, it's going to be a bit earlier, but you do have to wait until that fall migration kicks off to start tagging.
That's a good point. We don't want to tag the ones heading north and wonder why they're going from Texas up to, Minnesota.
Now you can, if you are wanting to participate in another like a more health related Monarch program. Project Monarch Health is run out of a lab in Georgia, and they will send you a small kit to actually take samples for a disease or a protozoan parasite that monarchs can get. So you can monitor disease throughout the year if you're really interested in getting started now. That's a different program that you could be a part of.
Oh, that's really cool. So Project Monarch Health.
Yes.
That's great. We'll put a link to that in the description too. And so last question here. What is one thing people are surprised to learn about monarchs or their conservation needs that you want to share with people?
I think one of the facts that is always just the most fascinating to, people that I'm out talking to and also to myself every time I remember it is that, that generation of monarchs each year, that fourth generation that is making the journey, sometimes from the southern part of Canada, the northern part of the US, like they're making this over several thousand-mile journey, and they have never been to this, patch of high elevation fir forest in central Mexico before. Like just thinking about how they can find that same spot that their great 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 grandparents generation were overwintering at is really amazing when you think about it. And that a creature that's about the weight of a paperclip is making that journey. I think that's always just an interesting fact to remember about the monarch.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, and I think it's quite a marvel. And before I got into this work, I didn't even know that. So I think that it's something.
Yeah.
I don't want to say everyone takes it for granted, but I think it is like a really amazing thing that we don't know enough about. And hopefully, through all of this work, we can help save it.
I
But
mean, yeah, some of us get lost just, all the time in much smaller areas, and they're
yeah,
making these huge journeys. So it is amazing to think about.
yeah, yeah. Well, for those of you listening, I hope you have learned a bit more about monarchs, tagging, how you can get involved. We do have Charlie Logsdon joining us from Roundstone Seed. But before we get into that, I want to thank Michaela for your time and talking with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
And thank you for tuning in to Forest for Monarchs Saving Butterflies, where we connect conservation, culture, and collaboration to safeguard the monarch migration and the habitats they call home. To learn more about our work, visit our website, www.forestformonarchs.org, and you can click the link in the description of the podcast. Our next guest is Charlie Logsdon. Charlie is a wildlife biologist with over 30 years of experience at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, where he led efforts in waterfowl, prairie, and elk restoration, earning recognition like the Governor's Excellence Award. After retiring, he joined Roundstone Native Seed, where he now helps landowners establish native plant communities and supports pollinator research, including monarch tagging. So thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. Thank you for being here.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Megan.
Yeah. So just to kick things off, can you tell us a bit more about Roundstone Native Seed and what you do?
Well, Roundstone Native Seed was started 30 years ago by a father and son collecting seed by hand. That was Randy and John Seymour. John was a struggling cattle tobacco farmer, and Randy was an entrepreneur, but he also is one of the best amateur botanists in the state of Kentucky. So since then, we've now grown from them picking seed by hand to we have 3,500 acres under production in the Upton, Kentucky area, 250 different species. And we also grow or have people grow for us in 7 different states. We have when we're at peak operation, we have 50 people employed.
Mhm.
And we do all aspects of it, from collecting seed in the field to put into production, all the way up to cleaning the seed, selling the seed, harvesting the seed. And there's many, many ways we harvest the seed. And we will sell you a $5 seed packet or send out a 50,000 pound order on a semi truck.
Wow.
And what I do is I will I do a lot of putting together custom mixes, working with landowners, telling them how to get their area prepared to plant. Also, what they need to do to plant, whether they're broadcasting, drilling, or hydroseeding.
Mhm.
We Another thing we do is hold their hand while they're waiting for the natives to develop, because they develop slower.
Mhm.
And then I also do some pollinator research. I do a lot of photography for the business. And basically, they let me do whatever I want when I get bored.
That's great. So it sounds like quite the operation. That's amazing.
Well, people don't realize how big we are.
Mhm.
And try to imagine a 3,500 acre farmer, except he has 250 different crops. We have a production area might be a row of 100 feet long, or it might be well over 100 acres of a native grassland. Or what's really interesting is when people come by and we're combining a lance leaf or black-eyed Susan field that's 25 acres. In fact, what has helped us with our tagging effort, which uh, we didn't start till last year because typically we're so busy, and I can only work seasonally since I retired. And a lot of times during that August to September period, I'll be off and I'll go visit my family in other states. But 2 years ago, I noticed in some power line right of ways that yellow wingstem would have tremendous numbers of monarchs.
Hmm.
So last year, I decided we were going to go out and tag butterflies. And first of all, we started noticing them in some of the prairie areas that we manage.
Mhm.
Dry upland prairies full of like flat top aster, round leaf thoroughwort, a lot of different species. Well, I was giving a tour of the area, and there were monarchs everywhere. So I went up and caught about 10, well, 10 there.
Mhm.
But then I had the other people, since we have people checking fields all the time,
Mhm.
I asked them to uh, tell me where they saw monarchs.
Mhm.
And we have a showy tick seed field, and I'm not sure if you know what showy tick seed is. It's
Wow.
more of a, but it's a 9 acre field that basically looks like a huge yellow postage stamp. And they saw them. One of the guys was checking the field, and he said, Charlie, I saw 5 just where we parked. And I went in there the next day and ran out of tags, had to wait to get the tags, ran out. Well, I didn't run out the next day. I had like 5 left, and then I got COVID, which took me out of that.
Yeah.
And once it was finished blooming, they were gone. But in about 4 hours, I tagged 50. If I'd had more tags, I always wondered how many I could actually have tagged, because what you would see in that tick seed field, you'd look across it
Mhm.
and there were sailboats hanging on all kinds of showy tick seed. And the thing is, what we noticed, or what I noticed, is I'd sit up there and look in the sky, and you'd see a monarch way up in the sky, and then all of a sudden, vroom. And what it is, they're seeing that big yellow uh, postage stamp down there
Yeah.
dropping out. And I caught them over 3 days because I had to take off waiting for the other tags to get there. And I would never catch a tagged one. In fact, I only saw one tagged one. So they were hitting it,
Mhm.
getting energy is what I was thinking, and
Yeah.
then would start moving on.
Yeah.
Well, working with Michaela and Fish and Wildlife this year, what we're going to do is Roundstone's going to provide seed, and we're planting 5 or 6 more showy tick seed fields across the state
Amazing.
just to see if it happens again. And what I designed, and I don't know if this is good or not, but what I'm thinking about doing is putting a tier of tick seed fields around the northern part of the state,
Mhm.
another tier of them across the middle, and then another tier across the uh, southern,
Mhm.
to see when the monarchs first show up, because they showed up much earlier than what we anticipated.
Okay.
If they show up in the north, then if they show up in the south, and get a timeline. If in a miracle we happen to catch some between the sites, that would be interesting. What
Yeah.
it means, I don't know, because you have to look at long-term data sets before you start uh, even making any kind of assumptions or whatever about it. But I just thought it would be interesting. And believe it or not, that idea came from when I did waterfowl research. In that, I would look at one time, way back in the 80s, I was a research biologist. And at that time, Canada geese and the Mississippi flyway still migrated. They
Okay.
no longer get migrate really down into the southern areas
Okay.
due to warming up in the northern areas and some other issues. But since they had collars, I could see the numbers on them.
Okay.
And when they started to go back, I watched them leave one site in the south, Reelfoot Lake. They would jump about 60 or 80 miles north
Mhm.
to Ballard County, WMA. And what they were doing is, when they left, they were going from one energy source to another energy source to help with their migration north. Well, I just thought, when we put these tiered levels together on their way down, would they be stopping at one energy source, jumping to the next energy source, and
Mhm.
just keep doing that? So we'll find out. It's, the key is to do long-term data sets.
Yeah.
Good science is good science. And
Okay.
and so, whether it's elk, eagles, or monarchs, good science is good science. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things that's special about the Monarch is the citizen science or the community science where really anyone can get involved and start tracking the monarchs. I think that sounds like a great experiment to see. And we talked to Michaela about that. Essentially, like rest stops for the monarchs. They need that gas, that fuel to keep going north, and then when they come back south. So I think that's great. That's exciting to hear about that initiative. So it sounds like you talked a little bit about how Roundstone got involved in the monarch tagging. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you got involved and what a typical tagging session looks like? Some people might be hearing this and they don't really know much about tagging, or maybe they think we get questions a lot that does it hurt the monarchs? What does that involve? Could you talk a bit more about that?
Well, the thing is, working here on the area, I know when they're there every day,
Mhm.
which is good because they'll come in, tell me they're seeing them. I'll leave and I'll go out there. I'll catch them. The key is you, and this is what, no matter what animal you're working with, it doesn't matter the size. You want to keep the time that you're associated with it as short as possible. That's how, but you also need to be firm, but you need to take care of the animals. So when I go out there, I'll have everything set up. I'll have my tags on my clipboard. I'll go ahead and fill out the location area, things like that. I'll catch it. I'll have the tag ready, remove it, put it on the wing, make sure I hold it for a few seconds, make sure I've got all the data and let it go. And if you've got it planned out, you can actually keep that time down to a minute or so, maybe even less, but you've got to hold it long enough to make sure that tag sets. But you don't have to hold them a long time. And the less time you have them, in my opinion, the better off you are.
And with the tagging, like do you need tools? What would someone need if they wanted to start tagging, and where do they get the tags?
You can get the net anywhere. You can call any of the biological supply houses will have them. I actually have two. One was just a non-expandable one,
Mhm.
but I have one that will expand out to 6 feet. And what you have there is I like the expandable one because the plants that you catch them on might be 2 feet, they might be 8 feet. Okay, so one other place that I caught a few was in our Joe Pyeweed fields, which is I'm not sure which subspecies y'all have up there, but they can get 8 feet tall.
Wow.
Showy Tixie can get 6 feet tall. And so uh, the longer reach you have will allow you to get them more effectively. Okay. And you can find all this on the Monarch Watch website where they'll talk about how to handle them, how to tag them, um, all kinds of different ways that the citizens can get involved in. And this year here at Roundstone, we're looking at, due to our success last year, I think of the ones reported, we caught the most in the state. But we're looking at having a weekend for our employees. I'm going to be training some other employees so that when you're out looking, if you all of a sudden there's monarchs and it takes a minute to get each one or to effectively get one, you can get several in a few minutes. But again, remember, this is a unique situation. We have people on the ground all the time checking fields to see if they're ready for harvest, if they're in full bloom. But with the tiered program, we're lining up garden clubs and going in other groups, other people interested in pollinators, and we're just going to start calling them when we start seeing them. And of course, the Department of Fish and Wildlife will have employees doing it. But the key is to get people involved. We do a lot of things here. We give tours after June 1st of the facility, and we'll show people some of our production fields. We'll show them some of the natural areas, show them how we clean seed, all aspects of the operation. And we'll also show them some of the unique areas that we protect. And the Seymours, I guess it was 2 years ago, were nominated for a Aldo Leopold Award because of our savanna restoration. In Kentucky, there was, prior to settlement, there's probably 3 million acres of oak savanna and tall grass prairie maintained by Native Americans through burning. And where we're at, it was part of that. You can see that by looking at the composition of the forest and things like that. So we started trying to restore them, and now we're expanding it even more. And that could be a whole nother podcast, or actually it could be a textbook. But this is something that we're working on. We show people that, but we also show them things that they can do to get involved. And maybe not in the citizen science part of it, but to get them, their kids or themselves, interested in pollinators. Mm. And one thing we do is we will drive a T-post, a fence post, about 2 feet away from a flower head like butterfly milkweed, ironweed, things like that, and put a trail camera on it and set it to take a video every 15 minutes. And what we've had happen is, in one picture, I had 15 butterflies fluttering on a butterfly milkweed. Amazing. Both color phases of the eastern tiger swallowtail, lots of spice bush butterflies, pearly crescents, and one monarch. And people look at it, and it's something they can do with their kids and just get them interested. You know, it's one thing for people to watch videos, it's another to go out there and see it and participate.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the key things, is getting out there and doing something, getting involved. I think that's the best thing. So you said you collect data when you are tagging them. What data are you collecting for that?
Well, of course, we collect the sex, whether it's a male or female, the date, the nearest city location. We also record what plant they're using, and of course, the number of the tag.
All that, and then all that data gets reported back to where would someone go with that?
Well, you can send it in to the Monarch Watch, but what we do in Kentucky is we send it to Michaela, who puts all the data together, and then she will forward it on. Although I believe there is one group that sends it in themselves. But Michaela is like the clearinghouse for all things Monarch in Kentucky, and does an excellent job. And but she handles all of that. She sends out all the tags. If you can order them, I think, through Monarch Watch, but what I do is I call Michaela and say, I need this many tags. And so it's an exciting relationship.
Yeah, that's great to hear that it's at such a statewide level. That's really exciting. I think we get questions about that too from folks, is how do we get our community, our town, or our state more involved? And that's exciting to hear that Kentucky is really taking an initiative with that.
Well, the thing is that other states do similar things, but the thing I always like to think of is, why shouldn't people do it? It's like there's baseball season, there's football seasons, there's monarch tagging seasons there, and it's what you mark time with. And so around the 1st of August, begin to think about monarchs, go check the fields, call somebody who has a field and see, but get all the, anybody can do it. It's just doing it correctly. And more data is more data.
Yeah. And you just brought up an important point, actually, is you get monarchs migrating north and on their way back to Mexico. When should folks be planning on tagging?
Well, you want to do it on the way to Mexico. Okay, that's, very seldom does a scientist come up with a unique world changing event or whatever. And when they figured out how to tag monarchs, that was one of them. And because all of a sudden, the world of migration and the life and much more information about the life history of them just became apparent.
Yeah.
But what I look at it as is when it comes August, you should tag uh monarchs.
Yeah.
And people don't understand when I say this is that should be the norm. You just should expect to do it. It may be exciting, but you should just expect to do it and go out there and tag monarchs. Yeah, you can think about those type of things. It just is part of your life. And
Yeah.
that's important, is to make wildlife, nature a part of your life.
Yeah.
And so, but that's how I look at it.
What advice would you give someone? Maybe it's a parent or someone who has a small business, who wants to either join or get involved. What advice would you give them?
First of all, in Kentucky, we have a pollinator working group. Okay. You can contact them, contact Michaela, and she can give you uh, information about everything that's going on pollinator wise. And that's one thing I'd like to say is, yes, this is about monarchs, but it brings attention to the plight of all pollinators. 90% of our native pollinators have disappeared.
Mhm.
And the good thing about the monarch is we're working to protect it, but it's a doorway into a much bigger world, the world of pollination, the world of flowers, how to maintain those flowers, how to maintain working ecosystems. Uh, you learn more about the history of this place we live on, but looking to see how it changes. Uh, there's just so much. This is just an opening into a much bigger world of nature.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for your time and talking about your work, what Roundstone is doing, and all of the wonderful work with Monarch tagging being accomplished. To our listeners, if you have more questions or interest in Monarch tagging, please check the information box below of the podcast episode. We'll have some links to how you can get involved.
I'm excited to introduce our next guest, Cynthia Zhang. Cynthia is an environmental activist, researcher, and artist driven to fight biodiversity loss and climate change by sharing the wonders of the natural world. Her journey began in middle school, where she joined the Rewild Summer Program and later became co-chair of Rewild Social Media Committee. Deeply inspired by Rewild's mission and the transformative experience of tagging and releasing monarch butterflies, she founded Monarchs Matter in 2023 to empower communities to support wildlife and restore native habitats. Now a junior at Great Neck South High School, Cynthia is committed to engaging youth in environmental stewardship as the president of Area C, Animals Rescue and Environmental Awareness Club, and advancing biodiversity and species conservation through her school's research program. So, Cynthia, we're excited to have you, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk a bit more about how you essentially were inspired by conservation, your experience, and beyond just getting involved, you then started your own organization. So just so that folks listening can learn more, just tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you started this, and how Monarchs Matter came to be.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and president of Monarchs Matter, and I founded Monarchs Matter 3 years ago, where I started raising monarch butterflies in my own home since I was inspired by another fellow Long Islander here in New York. Her name's Tanya Klusner. You could search her up. She's been on the news a couple of times because she has raised like thousands of monarch butterflies in her own home, and one day when I was volunteering at a community garden, she came and brought like a huge batch of her monarchs for us youth volunteers to like witness the metamorphosis. We saw the caterpillar like turn into a chrysalis, and then we were also able to hold and release the monarch butterflies. So it was a really magical experience, and I couldn't forget about it. So I wanted to try raising my monarchs on my own at like a small scale, so we don't have that much of an environmental impact since we want to like leave nature be. So I tried to raise at a small scale, and then I wanted to share that experience with other youth too. So I started like a summer program and also like a webinar series and other projects focused on habitat restoration because that's what really helps the monarch butterfly population.
With Monarchs Matter, how has the community response been with people, youth or any age? What are you seeing in response to the work you're doing?
Yeah, I feel like not only youth but also a lot of adults, they're really like entranced by the monarchs like metamorphosis, and like whenever I get the chance to at community events, when I present about monarchs, I try to bring like some monarch butterflies if I can, and then I let like families and like children hold the monarch butterflies, and it's their favorite part. And at like one of the events, they like stayed for an hour just like holding the monarch butterflies because the monarchs didn't want to leave since they were like freshly hatched.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to that, how do you inspire folks to get involved? How are you letting people know that you're doing this work, and how are they getting to you?
Yeah, so we mainly reach out to people in person, like through in-person events in our community, in our Raise Tag Release summer program with high schoolers and some middle schoolers, and also through social media. A lot of people, like especially youth, which we want to target, are avid users of social media. So we try to post like inspirational and educational content on like our Instagram and YouTube. On YouTube, we also have our webinar recordings so people could learn more in how to get involved.
That's great. And for those listening, are there ways that they can get involved with Monarchs Matter? Are you focused in Long Island, or can folks from anywhere try to get involved?
Yeah, we try to, we welcome anyone to get involved. Um, in our community, we have our summer program and our way station program where we help build and fund monarch way stations. But we also welcome youth from anywhere in the world to start new chapters because really our mission is to fight biodiversity loss and climate change, and not just because monarch butterflies is just part of it, but there are also many other native species and wildlife that also need help. So we welcome anyone to start a new chapter, and we currently have two chapters, in one in Nigeria and one in Pakistan, where they're trying to support their local pollinators there and like plant native trees and flowers to um, support wildlife and fight like climate change related events like flooding. And we also have like a local chapter too here in the South Fork of Long Island.
That's great. And how would someone, so say someone's listening and they want to get involved, they're thinking about starting a chapter, where would they go for that? What steps should they take?
Yeah, so on the website we have a start a chapter guide. It's a step-by-step guide to kind of give you a preview of what starting a chapter is like. And if you think you're ready or if you have any questions, if you're interested, you could reach out to us at monarchsmatter.net@gmail.com, which is also on the page. And yeah, we're ready to help you in any way we can.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that that link is in the description of the episode. So anyone listening can just click that and go right to it. And with that, so you work a lot with the community and all different types of people within the community. What does community science mean to you?
Yeah, so when we engage our youth in the summer program, one large part is the community science activities that we do. So for we not only let youth raise monarch butterflies, but we also during our in-person weekly sessions, our main activity is to collect community science data so they could engage with the milkweed plants in our gardens and they could see like the monarch eggs and the monarch butterflies that are coming and visiting and the milkweed and how it's like supporting all not only monarchs but also like other insects. We often see like milkweed beetles, ladybugs, ants and other like insect eggs. So it really shows that like native plants are not only essential for like monarch butterflies, but also other species. They're like the foundation of all wildlife. And that's what we want our students to know. And we also like distribute milkweed plants to our students so they could support monarchs and other native wildlife in their lawn and also collect like community science data from it if they want.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you're seeing that by having people engaged in hands-on experiences, they're seeing that they're staying interested and they want to continue that and get involved. So that's great. And I know we have some people listening out there who sometimes, I think we probably all feel it. Is I'm just one person. How can I really make a difference? There's challenges with the climate, with pollinators, with habitat restoration that can seem overwhelming. What is one thing that you would say to someone who said, well, how can I really make a difference? What would you say to them?
Yeah, whenever I hear something like this, I think of the quote. I saw it on like Instagram, one of like an environmental account, and the quote went something like, "I'm just one person. What can I do?" Said 8 billion people. So if you make a difference or like take action in your little corner of the world, and everyone does that in their corners of the world, it could add up to big change. So whether it's like replacing some of the plants in your yard with native plants or collecting some community science data like once a week or like volunteering at a nonprofit whenever you're free and little things like that, it could really add up if we all contribute to like the cause.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. We're just one person, but there's so many of us. We can all make a difference in some way. I love that. Well, so thank you, Cynthia. That is the time we have, and I'm really appreciative of you coming and talking about Monarchs Matter and your work. I think it's really inspirational to hear from people who just started. You went to a program and you were so inspired, and you were able to create something from that. And I think it's a good reminder for everyone listening that we all can make change some way. And so thank you again for your time. Looking forward to hearing from folks. If anyone does have questions about Monarchs Matter, like I said, the link will be in the description. You can email either us or Cynthia. We'll make sure that that email that we shared is in there as well. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. This was so fun. Also my first podcast too, so I'm so
Oh,
excited.
great. Awesome.
And thank you for listening to Forest for Monarchs Saving Butterflies podcast. This is us signing off for a bit. We hope to come back at the end of the year with another episode around the decision to list the monarch as threatened or not under the Endangered Species Act. But until then, if you want more information or you want to get involved, please visit us at www.forestformonarchs.org. And thank you so much for listening.